Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, please hit that sub button and join the family. We're so close to 30,000 subs, and you can make that possible. Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's stories.
Disclaimer on reading materials. The stories are carefully crafted, altered, and embellished by our team. This is to abide by YouTube's policies on reading materials. We hold sole intellectual rights to these stories as original content. It was around early fall when I met Freddie. Not like the cozy, pumpkin-scented kind of fall. More like human mornings where the air conditioner gives up by noon and every leaf just looks sad. I was swiping half out of boredom, half because I'd promised myself I'd say yes to more things, whatever that meant. His profile was sharp, polished, like he curated it with intention. A few black and white photos, a decent smile, said he worked in architecture and loved hiking. He mentioned something about red wine and thunderstorms, which made me roll my eyes a little, but I swiped right anyway. We matched almost instantly. Our conversation started kind of stiff, but it warmed up when we started trading favorite movie endings. His was Eternal Sunshine. Mine was The Social Network, not the ending itself, just the way it leaves you cold. He said that was a little dark, and I said, exactly. First date was decent. We met at this tapas spot that always smells faintly like burnt cheese. He walked in wearing a soft brown sweater and jeans that looked expensive, the kind that fit too well to be an accident. He had a smooth voice, like one of those podcast narrators who reviews crime documentaries. He asked me a lot of questions about my past relationships, which I thought was a little odd for a first date, but he framed it like he was learning how people heal. That kind of thing sounds deep in the moment, especially when someone's staring at you across candlelight, but later it just felt too studied. We saw each other again 2 nights later. He texted me in the morning with "can't stop thinking about that smile," and was half flattered, half suspicious. The second date, he invited me to his place, which was on the top floor of this old building with no elevator and a hallway that smelled like paint and popcorn. His apartment was minimal, cold, even. Everything was black, white, or gray. No photos. No mess. He had 3 copies of the same book on the shelf. When I asked why, he just said, "It's that important to me." Still don't know what that meant. I started noticing little things that didn't quite add up. He'd mentioned how much he liked the way I wore my hair that day, even though it was the exact same as the day before. He said he loved my low laugh, and I don't even have a low laugh. He complimented a bracelet I wasn't wearing. Then came the weirdest moment. He casually asked me if I'd ever thought about dyeing my hair red. I laughed and said, "What, like in middle school?" And he said something like, "Just curious, I think it'd suit you." Next date, he showed up with a scarf. Said it was a gift. It was deep green, not my color at all, but I wore it for the night to be polite. He smiled in this way that gave me chills. I had passed a test. We were on our 5th or 6th date when it hit me. We were walking through this bookstore, his idea, of course, and he pointed at this girl standing near the fiction section. He leaned in and said, "She looks like Amanda." I asked who that was. He paused just a little too long and then said, "My ex." Something clicked. The red hair, the bracelet, the scarf. All the subtle nudges, the weird little compliments that didn't quite fit. It wasn't that he liked me. He liked who he thought I could turn into. Or rather, who I reminded him of. Amanda. I didn't say anything that night, but the next time we met up, I noticed how intensely he was watching me. Not in a flirty way, in a sculptor staring at clay way. I tried to change the subject every time it got too reflective, but he always steered it back to identity and core traits, and stuff that sounded more like a therapy session than a date. It all came to a head the night you walked me home. It was cold, unusually quiet, like the whole block was asleep. He stood at my doorstep, arms crossed, rocking slightly on his heels. Then he leaned in, hugged me way too tightly, and whispered something about just one kiss. I said no, not harshly, but firmly. He froze, stepped back, and then tried to play off like he wasn't even asking. I shut the door and just stood there for a while. My heart wasn't racing or anything. It was more like this dull ache in my chest. Like the vibe was permanently off now. I tried to sleep, but kept waking up. Around 3 in the morning, my phone started ringing. It was Freddie. I didn't pick up. Then it rang again, and again. After the 3rd time, a text popped up. "Look outside." I got out of bed, opened the curtain just a little, and there he was, standing across the street in the middle of the road, holding his phone up like it was a microphone. He was singing. Not yelling, not dramatic, just singing like it was a scene from a movie. It wasn't a love song either. It was something slow, weirdly quiet, like a lullaby. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt my stomach twist. I didn't open the window. I didn't text him back. I just called the police and gave them his name and what I could see from the window. He didn't even try to hide. Just stood there like this was some big romantic gesture. They showed up maybe 10 minutes later. One officer walked over to him, said something, and Freddie just sort of nodded and followed him to the car. He didn't resist, didn't argue, just acted like he completed some final act in a play. After that, I blocked him on everything. Phone, socials, even deleted his name from my contacts just to get it out of my head. For a few days, I kept half expecting another text or email, something long and poetic. But nothing came, just silence. I told a few friends about it, and one of them, kind of jokingly, said, "Sounds like he's trying to build a Frankenstein version of his ex." It wasn't far off. He wasn't dating me, he was editing me, adjusting me until I matched someone who clearly still lived in his head. Someone he wasn't over. Someone he was trying to recreate with different skin. I still wonder if Amanda knows. If she knows he's out there searching for lookalikes and shaping them into her image. Probably not. But someone should warn her, or maybe warn whoever's next. I matched with Kaylani on this app that's always glitching on my phone. Her profile stood out right away. She was smiling in this blurry photo with kids' art behind her. Said she was a third-grade teacher who loved pancakes more than people and had some quote about kindness. I don't usually go for the super sweet types, but something about her made me curious. She messaged first and asked me what my favorite smell was, which I thought was weird but kind of cool too, like she was really trying to get to know me beyond the usual "what do you do" stuff. We met up at this coffee spot that looked like it was made from reclaimed wood and Instagram filters. She walked in wearing this oversized denim jacket and had a tote bag that said "books greater than boys," which made me laugh. She talked fast, had this high-pitched laugh that caught me off guard, but overall she was fun. Easy to talk to. Said she was into journaling and niche podcasts. We ended up walking around after, just talking about dumb things like what superpower we'd want. I thought the date went well. The second date was even better. We went to this weird museum about packaging history. I know, random, but she suggested it, and I was like, sure, why not? She was all excited the whole time, pointing out things and talking about the weirdest facts. I liked that she wasn't trying to be cool or act disinterested. When I got home, she texted me today was 9/10. Would date again. I remember grinning at my phone. Then on the third date, I'd noticed she had this little clip-on mic thingy on her jacket. I pointed to it and joked, "What are you spying on me?" And she laughed and said it was for note-taking. I didn't push it because I assumed maybe she used it for work or some personal project. Maybe she was a writer or trying to be one. She was the kind of person who would record thoughts to herself, right? We hung out like 5 or 6 times. One time we sat in the park eating gas station snacks and talking about childhood TV shows. Another time we people watched at the farmer's market and made up stories for everyone who walked past. She was always asking me these deep, odd questions, like what sound reminds me of home or if I ever felt invisible in my family. I thought she was just being emotionally intelligent or whatever. Then one night, I get this random message from a guy I don't know. He sends me a link to this podcast on Spotify with this cartoon apple wearing glasses as the logo. It's called Dates with Strangers. I click on it, thinking maybe it's unrelated. But then I see the episode title, Mr. Coffee Shop and His Emotional Armor. My heart dropped. I press play and it starts with Kaylani's voice. Same laugh, same speech patterns, except she's narrating like some kind of storyteller. She starts describing our first date, the coffee place, my hoodie, how I drank an oat milk latte and made a joke about how I don't trust milk that lies. She's doing this voice that's kind of mocking but also trying to be charming, like she thinks she's being clever. I keep listening. She talks about how she's dating around and recording everything for this experiment to explore how men emotionally present themselves in modern dating. She calls it field work. Says she's capturing the unsaid layers of communication between men and women. She even plays audio clips of me, my voice mid-conversation, talking about my dog, my old apartment, my first heartbreak. At first I thought maybe she just read things from memory, but no, she recorded me without telling me. I sat there frozen. I skipped through the other episodes. I wasn't even the only one. There were other guys, all described by vague nicknames. Some of their voices were deeper or had accents, but it was the same thing. Kaylani dissecting everything from what they wore to how they laughed at her jokes. It wasn't even anonymous. If someone knew me, they'd know it was me. I texted her. Just one message. Seriously. She didn't reply for a whole day. Then she finally messaged, "It's not personal. I anonymize everything and it's for a creative series. You came off really well." What does that even mean? I came off really well? Like I'm a character. I read that message over and over. The next few days I felt weirdly exposed. Like all those moments that felt real, walking around with Slurpees, talking about my weird uncle, laughing at squirrels, were actually just content to her. I kept thinking back to all the things I said, the stuff I admitted when I thought we were just two people vibing. Turns out I was a segment, an episode. I didn't reply. I blocked her on everything. For a week, I kept checking the podcast page to see if she uploaded anything else about me. She didn't, but the old episode stayed up. People were even commenting on it. Some said, he sounds sweet, and others were judging me, saying I seemed emotionally distant or passive-aggressive. They were analyzing me like I was a TV character, like I wasn't a real person. The weirdest part, I still couldn't figure out if I was angry or just embarrassed. I didn't tell many people. Just one friend who told me I should report her, but honestly, I didn't even know where to start. I wasn't sure if it was illegal or just messed up. I wanted to move on, but every time someone mentioned podcasts, I flinched a little. And any time someone pulled out their phone during a date, I'd get suspicious. I even started thinking about whether I'd said anything stupid or problematic, whether people online were laughing at me. The whole thing just left this weird taste in my mouth. I stopped dating for a while. I deleted the app. Focused on work, went to the gym more, started reading again. Eventually, I started telling myself she was probably just desperate for content or validation or whatever. But it doesn't change the fact that someone used me without asking and made me a voice in a show I didn't know I was part of. Anyway, that's the Kaylani story.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I met Olivia on a Wednesday night while I was sitting in my car waiting for a burrito. I remember that because I was eating cold fries from the bottom of the bag while swiping and trying to ignore the fact that I had been stood up 2 nights earlier. Her profile didn't try too hard. A couple beach photos, one where she was holding a mango and laughing, and another with her dog. She had a calm vibe. Bio just said, looking for a good listener and someone who doesn't hate cilantro. I like that. We started chatting that night and it was easy. No forced flirty lines or fake interest in books. Just her asking me why I picked that burrito place and then telling me she'd never had a burrito without rice in it. We texted for a few days, nothing deep, mostly food takes and random jokes. Then we decided to meet. Our first date was at this small Vietnamese spot I always recommend because it's quiet and the spring rolls are better than they should be. Olivia showed up in a white hoodie and jeans, and her hair was tied up like she hadn't overthought it. She had that kind of face where she looked genuinely interested in everything you said. We talked for a long time. I learned she worked part-time as a translator, spoke 3 languages, and had a cat named Blue. She told me she moved around a lot growing up. Something about her felt a little floaty, like she wasn't totally planted here yet, but I liked it. The second date, we walked around this lake trail near my place. I'd never actually walked it with a date before, so it felt different. She told me she was into old buildings and weird documentaries about survivalists. She made fun of me for not knowing what cardamom was. After the walk, we grabbed tacos and sat on a curb, laughing about this guy who walked past us trying to carry 4 dogs and 1 coffee. That's the moment I remember feeling like, okay, this could be something. The third and fourth dates kind of blurred together, more walking, more food, late night texting. It never felt forced. She didn't overshare, but she didn't shut down either. I never felt like I had to chase her or perform. She asked a lot of questions, though, especially about where I saw myself living or if I liked to travel. Stuff that seemed casual, but now I look back and it was maybe her way of gathering info. Then on the 5th date, things took a weird turn. We were sitting at this rooftop bar. The sun was setting in that ridiculous way where every photo looks edited, and she was being quiet. Not in a bad mood kind of way, just thoughtful. After a while, she looked over and said something like, "Have you ever thought about getting married early?" I laughed because it came out of nowhere and sounded like a joke. But she didn't laugh. She looked dead serious, said something about how certain life choices are more about timing than love. I asked what she meant, and she took a deep breath and explained, very calmly, that her visa situation was a bit complicated, that she was looking for stability, and that if someone was open-minded and understood that marriage didn't have to be romantic, it could be practical, then maybe something could work. I just sat there. I think I nodded or said, "Oh, wow," or something dumb like that. She wasn't pushing it like a proposal, but it was definitely more than a hypothetical. She asked if I would ever be open to something like that. Not right now, but soon. She said she trusted me. Said I seemed kind and thoughtful and that those qualities were rare. Now listen, I'm not totally clueless. I've heard of this stuff happening, but hearing it from someone I've been dating, someone I liked and trusted, that hit different. She wasn't sketchy about it. She didn't offer money. She didn't say green card. She was careful with her words. She said it would be mutually beneficial, that she'd be independent and not expect anything from me financially, just that it would help her stay here and finish school and not have to go back to a place she barely had ties to anymore. I asked her how many people she'd asked. She said none. That was the only one she felt safe asking, and that part messed with my head more than anything else. I didn't give an answer that night. I walked her home, gave her a quick hug, and left without saying much. I didn't sleep that night. My brain just kept running through all the layers. Was she planning this from the beginning? Was everything a setup? Or was she really just in a bad spot and trying to survive it? The next day, I told one friend. He laughed and said, "Bro, she tried to green card you," but then got quiet when he saw I wasn't laughing. I didn't tell anyone else. I felt weirdly protective of her. Like if I told the story wrong, it would sound worse than it was. A couple days later, I texted her and said we should talk. We met at a coffee place and sat in the corner where no one could hear us. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but I wasn't in a place where I could consider something that big. That wasn't mad. I didn't want to keep dating if there were expectations I couldn't meet. She nodded the whole time. Didn't interrupt. Just sat there with her hands folded, looking down at the table. She said she understood. That she hadn't meant to scare me off. That she just figured it was worth asking. We didn't talk much after that. A week later, I saw her on the app again with a slightly different profile. New photos, same quiet energy. I didn't swipe, just closed it. It's been a while since then. I still think about it. Not in a regretful way, just in a "that really happened" kind of way. The whole thing felt like something that only happens to someone else, but it happened to me. So yeah, that was Olivia. I wasn't even trying to date at the time. I'd just moved into this crappy one bedroom with carpet that felt like Velcro and blinds that didn't quite close. My kitchen light flickered like a horror movie and my neighbor vacuumed every night at 1 a.m. But one night I was scrolling out of boredom, trying to ignore the weird clanking from the pipe under the sink, and I saw Daniel. His profile wasn't anything crazy, just a few selfies, one photo of him at a concert, another with a golden retriever that I assumed wasn't his. But he had this laid-back look, like someone who never rushed anywhere and probably made perfect scrambled eggs. The kind of guy who wore sweatshirts that actually looked cool. I swiped right because why not? And he messaged like an hour later with "okay, but pineapple on pizza. Yes or no?" We started talking a lot. He was funny in a quiet way, like not the kind of guy who tries to be the loudest in the room, but the one who drops one-liners under his breath and makes everyone laugh. He said he worked in sound editing for indie films. I didn't even know what that meant, but it sounded creative, and I was into it. Our first date was at this weird bowling alley bar combo with low lights and sticky tables. He wore a faded hoodie, black jeans, and smelled like citrus and dryer sheets. We talked about horror movies, childhood snacks, and this one time he accidentally got locked inside a pet store. He wasn't super polished, but that made him feel more real. I liked that he didn't seem to be trying too hard. He texted me when I got home and said, "You ate tonight easy." For the next couple of weeks, we hung out a lot. Little things, not big dates. Watching dumb YouTube videos on his couch, walking around grocery stores with no plan, eating cereal at midnight. I'd go over after work sometimes and we'd order takeout and just chill. It felt natural, like we'd known each other longer than we had. He told me he had a roommate, which didn't surprise me. Rent in the city was ridiculous, and every guy I met either lived with roommates or was pretending he didn't. But I never met the roommate. He always said she worked nights or was out with friends. I didn't think too much about it at first. Then one night I was brushing my teeth in his bathroom and noticed there were two toothbrushes. One was clearly used, not like a backup one or a guest brush. I asked him casually about it when I came out, and he kind of paused and said, "Oh, that's my roommate's. She leaves it in here sometimes." I didn't push, but something about the way he said it made me pause. Another time, I opened a drawer in the kitchen looking for a spoon and saw a bunch of folded notes with hearts drawn on them, like actual paper notes. I didn't open them, but I mentioned them, and he kind of laughed and said, "We write each other dumb stuff sometimes." I told myself maybe it was just a weird roommate dynamic. I wanted to believe that. But the more time I spent there, the more cracks showed up. There were framed pictures of him and her on the bookshelf, close together, holding hands in one. A snow globe from Paris that he said was hers, but she left it out. Her shampoo in the shower. Her coat on the hook by the door. One time I saw a necklace on the counter, and when I moved it to the side, he said, "Careful, she gets mad if that tangles." It was starting to eat at me, so I asked, not in an accusing way, just straight up. I said, "Hey, is your roommate your ex?" He didn't even hesitate. He just said, "Yeah. I mean, we broke up a few months ago, but we're still figuring things out." That hit like a truck. I just stared at him, and he looked at me like I was the one being dramatic. I asked if she knew he was dating again, and he kind of shrugged and said, "I don't really talk to her about it." So let me get this straight. They broke up, but still lived together, still shared a bathroom, still exchanged notes, still called the apartment ours, and she didn't even know I existed. Cool. I left pretty quickly that night. I didn't even try to make it clean or easy. I just told him I needed to think and walked out. As soon as I got home, I started piecing things together in my head. The way he always wanted to hang out at his place but never brought up mine. The way he never answered texts when I knew he was home. The time he said we're redoing the living room like it was still their shared project. I sent him a long message the next day. Told him I wasn't mad he had history, but I couldn't be a side character in someone else's breakup. I didn't want to be sneaking in out of a situation that clearly wasn't finished. He replied with some vague apology about how he didn't expect to catch feelings so fast. Said he liked me. Said he thought maybe he could compartmentalize things better. Compartmentalize, like I was a file in a drawer. Like his life was a storage unit and I was just one more box to sort out later. After that, I stopped talking to him. I didn't block him, but I muted everything. A couple of weeks later, I got a message from an unknown number that just said, "I read everything. Thanks for being honest." I didn't reply. I figured it was her. Part of me felt bad for her. Part of me felt like she was probably stuck in a situation she didn't want to live in anymore, but didn't know how to leave. It's weird how someone can make you feel seen one minute and invisible the next. Like I was part of this hidden chapter in his life that he didn't want anyone else to know about. And once I found out the truth, I didn't feel special. I just felt like a placeholder. The guy who forgot to mention his breakup was still living with him. It started because I forgot to cancel my dating app subscription. That's literally it. I'd meant to delete the whole thing like a month earlier, but I missed the renewal date. And I was like, well, yes, I'm stuck here for another 30 days, so I might as well swipe. That's how Yasmin showed up. Her profile looked like a Pinterest board for modern bolo life. White linens, iced matcha, sun hats, hanging plants in every corner. She had this calm, glowy energy. You know the type. Never posts anything blurry, always says vibe instead of plan. I remember her first message was, "You look like someone who listens before they speak." I had no clue what that even meant, but I wasn't going to argue. I told her I liked her plants and asked if she could keep them alive or if she was faking it for photos. She laughed and said she names them so she'll feel guilty if they die. That actually made me laugh out loud. We met at this outdoor cafe where the menu was on a chalkboard and everyone brought their dog. She showed up wearing a brown jumpsuit and sandals, carrying a tote that said, "Romanticize your own life." She talked like she'd been to 5 sound baths that week, but she was smart and not in a show-off way. She listened closely, gave thoughtful answers, never made it feel like a job interview. I left thinking I maybe liked her more than I'd planned to. Over the next few weeks, we went on a bunch of dates. Walks through vintage markets, wine bars where the lighting was dim on purpose, even a group pottery class where I made a mug that looked like it had survived an earthquake. She was always suggesting these niche little places I'd never heard of. Spots that were quiet but trendy, like she had an internal Yelp that filtered out crowds. I started calling her my personal bio curator in my head. She asked a lot of questions, but not in a nosy way. More like she was collecting puzzle pieces. She'd say stuff like, "What's something you only admit to someone you trust?" Or, "If you had to describe your attachment style without using psychology words, what would you say?" Stuff that caught me off guard, but somehow made me open up. I told her about how I used to fake being asleep in the car so my mom wouldn't ask me about school. About how I only eat the crust if someone else is watching. She laughed a lot. I liked that she didn't judge. She always had her phone, though. Not in a rude way. She wasn't scrolling while we talked, but she'd take little notes sometimes. I assumed it was for work. She told me she worked at a matchmaking agency, helping clients find compatibility through behavioral stuff. I figured it was mostly background checks and organizing events or something. She said it involved patterns and conversation styles, which sounded interesting but kind of vague. I didn't ask too many questions. About a month in, we were lying on her couch, half watching a movie and half talking about how we used to act in middle school. She asked if I'd be okay taking some personality quiz things she had on her laptop. She said it helped her with work and was kind of fun. I was like, sure, whatever. I'd done BuzzFeed quizzes at 2 a.m. before. How bad can it be? It was long, like 90 questions long. All about relationships, fears, how I argue, how I interpret silence, how I respond to disappointment. Some of them were worded in a way that felt oddly specific. I joked that it sounded like someone's ex wrote it. She laughed, said, kind of, and kissed me. Then she asked if she could record our next conversation for training purposes. I thought she was joking, but she said it helped her break down tone and pacing. I didn't want to be a jerk, so I said yeah, as long as I didn't end up in a YouTube ad. She promised I wouldn't, said it was private. That's when I started to notice the shift. She got a little more clinical, like she was analyzing my answers in real time. One night, I told a story about how I once got dumped at a diner and ended up talking to the waitress for 2 hours just because I didn't want to go home yet. She looked at me and said, "You're probably the kind of person who feels rejection more as confusion than pain." I remember blinking and saying, "Oh, maybe." It was like she'd written a report on me. The weirdest moment was when we went out to dinner and ran into this guy she apparently worked with. They talked for a minute, and then she introduced me as one of her daters. Not boyfriend, not friend. Dater. He nodded like that made perfect sense. I felt like I'd just been identified as a participant in a science project. Later that night, I asked her what that meant. She didn't seem thrown off. Said part of her job involved going on real dates so she could understand patterns in modern dating behavior. Said she never lied, she just omitted the details. That was part of her field work. I asked if she actually liked me or if this was just data collection. She said both. That it wasn't fake. That she liked spending time with me and thought I was interesting and easy to talk to. But that she also used those conversations to build profiles. Said her clients wanted deep matches and she had to know what real connection looked like. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just sat there feeling weirdly hollow, like I'd been emotionally drafted into something without knowing it. I thought we were building something, and it turns out it was a sample set. I left that night without saying much. I didn't text her again. She didn't chase after me, which kind of told me everything. A week later, I saw one of her agency's ads online, something about intuitive connection coaching. Her voice was in the background of the video describing how real conversations matter more than bios. It made my stomach turn. I'm not mad anymore. I guess I just wish I'd known sooner that I wasn't dating a person. I was dating a method, and the whole time I thought I was being seen, I was just being studied. What this could be. Alright, so the way I met Nathan was totally random. I wasn't even on a dating app that day. It was one of those awkward mutual friend things. My buddy Liam dragged me at his coworker's housewarming, and Nathan was there, leaning on the balcony railing like a sad indie movie character. He had this kind of tired face, like he'd just woken up from a nap he didn't mean to take. But we got talking. He asked me if I thought oranges or peaches had a better personality, and I was like, okay, this dude's weird, I'll roll with it. We hung out most of that night, mostly talking crap about the food table and how the music kept changing genres every 4 minutes. At some point I realized I hadn't checked my phone in hours, which was rare for me. He made fun of me for not liking olives and said people who hate olives are usually afraid of emotional intimacy. I still don't know if he was joking. We exchanged numbers. He texted me later that night with just, Team Peach, and from there we were kind of just in it. The next couple weeks were a blur in the best way. He had this messy charm. He never planned anything in advance, but somehow every time we met up, we ended up doing something cool. Like walking through this empty parking lot eating frozen yogurt at midnight, or watching this terrible movie at his friend's place where the subtitles didn't match the dialogue and we made up our own storylines. He was spontaneous in a way I found addictive. It didn't feel intense, but it also didn't feel casual. Like we weren't labeling anything, but there was something in the way he looked at me when I laughed, or how he'd send me dumb memes at 7 a.m. with no context. I remember thinking, okay, maybe this is going somewhere. After about 2 weeks, he invited me to dinner with his parents. I was surprised, like that felt fast, but he played it off like they were chill and always inviting people over, and it wasn't a big deal. I didn't want to overthink it. I just figured maybe this guy's more open than most, or maybe he just liked me that much. So I go. His parents live in this house that smells like rosemary and has framed quotes on the walls like choose joy and grateful hearts gather here. His mom hugged me right away. His dad offered me wine before I even took off my shoes. It felt oddly comfortable. Too comfortable. We're all sitting at dinner, me, Nathan, his mom, his dad, and his younger sister, and they start asking me regular small talk questions. Stuff like what I do, what shows I like, whether I believe in horoscopes. But then his sister says something like, "So, when's the wedding?" in a joking tone. I laugh awkwardly, and Nathan looks frozen for a second. Then he says, "Haha, not yet." Not yet? The rest of dinner I can't focus. I'm replaying his tone, watching his parents act like this whole thing is completely normal. His mom asked me if I wanted kids. Not if I ever want kids. Just, do I want kids? His dad called me a nice girl. I started to get that tight feeling in my chest, like when you realize you've missed an exit and now you're headed to another town. After dinner, I pulled him aside while we were washing dishes and just asked him straight up, what's going on? He dried his hands, avoided my eyes, and said, "Okay, please don't freak out," which is a wild thing to say before telling someone anything. Then he says, "I'm kind of in a complicated situation." I just stared at him. I didn't say anything. He took a breath and said, "I'm engaged." That sentence hit me like someone dropping a whole sink on my head. He went on to explain again, like this was a totally normal conversation, that he'd been engaged for almost a year, but it was rocky. His fiancée was emotionally closed off, and he'd been trying to figure out if he should stay or leave. He said he needed clarity, and he wanted to know how it felt to be with someone else before he made a final decision. He actually said that, out loud, like it was logical, like I should understand. I didn't even have a response. I think my brain was buffering. Then he says, "You were kind of like practice. I needed to know if I was really ready to walk away." I don't know how I didn't throw a dish at him. I had just left. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just grabbed my jacket and walked out of his parents' house without saying goodbye to anyone. Got in my car, sat there for a second, and then drove straight home. I didn't even listen to music. I just stared at the road, gripping the steering wheel like it could keep me from unraveling. The next day, he texted me a long message about how sorry he was, how he didn't mean to hurt me, how he genuinely liked me and got caught up in it. Said he thought maybe I was the sign he needed to finally end his engagement. That part made me furious. Like I was supposed to feel flattered, like I should be proud that I accidentally became the final test in his emotional science fair project. I didn't reply, not then, not ever. I blocked his number, deleted his messages, and told my friend Liam to never invite me to another party unless the guest list came with a background check. I think what messed me up most wasn't even a lie. It was that his parents knew. They looked at me like I was already family. His mom made me a plate of lemon cookies to take home. His sister made jokes like we were besties. And the whole time, I was just the test run. I still wonder if his fiancée ever found out. I think about what she'd say if she did. If she'd already suspected. If she knew the kind of guy he really was. Or if he played it off like nothing happened and just kept going through the motions. Sometimes I want to message her, but I never have. Not because I don't want to. I just don't want to be pulled back into that twisted little world he built, where people are props and love is just a choice you test before committing. This guy brought me home to meet his parents while someone else was probably at home wondering where her fiancé went. Okay, so I'm not the kind of person who usually dates people who say stuff like career focused or building an empire. That's not me. I'm more the type who accidentally gets flour on his hoodie while baking banana bread at midnight. But Lydia popped up on my feed one day, and I don't know, there was something about her. Her bio just said finance, coffee, chaos, and there was a photo of her sitting on a balcony with a laptop, holding a croissant like it owed her money. I was kind of in a slump when we matched. Like the kind of week where every meal is delivered and you forget what sunlight feels like. She messaged first, just said, "So, do you invest?" No hello, no opener. Straight into Wall Street energy. I told her I had a retirement account and that was the extent of it. She sent a laughing emoji and said, "Cute, we'll work on that." We set up a date pretty quick. She suggested a rooftop spot that I'd never heard of, some place with a reservation list and little candles in jars. I looked it up and almost bailed when I saw the menu. Everything was of a truffle or something fused, but I showed up anyway in my best attempt at an outfit that looked like I belonged there. She walked in like she owned the building. Tight dress, sleek ponytail, boots that looked like they cost more than my car insurance. She sat down and immediately started asking questions, where I worked, what I wanted long term, if I preferred passive or active income. I felt like I was being interviewed by a very beautiful startup founder. But I'll admit she was interesting. Sharp. She talked fast, but not in an annoying way. Said she worked in private equity consulting, which I pretended to understand. I asked her what that actually meant, and she said something about strategic deal flow and mid-cap portfolios. I just nodded and focused on not dropping my fork. We kept talking. I joked that I was more into creative stuff and didn't know anything about finance. She said she liked that. Said most guys she dated were obsessed with out-earning each other. That was a refreshing reset. I remember feeling good about that, like I was bringing something new to the table. We went on a few more dates, all of her suggestions. Upscale sushi one night, in this Italian place where the waiter asked if I wanted still or sparkling water, and I panicked and said half is fine. I'd noticed she always picked places with mood lighting and menus that didn't have prices. She didn't even glance at the check when it came, just smiled at me like she expected me to handle it. And I did, even when it stung a little. First date was around $85. Second was closer to $120. Then $150. I told myself it was worth it. She was smart, confident, and said things like market volatility with a straight face. Around the fourth date, I asked if she wanted to hang at my place. Just cook something, watch something, not be at a restaurant for once. She smiled and said soon. I just really like the energy of curated spaces. I didn't even know what that meant. The next week, we went to this wine tasting thing she'd heard about. She looked incredible, and I showed up with my shirt slightly wrinkled from not having a dryer sheet. We sat for the event, sipping tiny glasses and pretending we could tell the difference between earthy and dry. She flirted, touched my arm a lot, laughed at stuff that wasn't even funny. I felt like I was floating. Then I went to the bathroom and ran to the guy running the event. Super friendly. He asked if I was with the finance girl, which made me laugh. I said yeah, and he said, "Man, she brings a new one every week. You're number 4, I think." And he smiled like it was just some casual joke and walked off. I just stood there. My brain was catching up, slow but steady. I thought maybe he was wrong. Maybe she just liked wine events. Maybe she was networking. But I couldn't shake it. That night after I got home, I did something I don't usually do. I looked her up, searched her Instagram, then followed some tagged photos and found her Venmo. Her feed was a mess of little payments with food emojis and thank you notes. A pattern started to form. Every week, a different guy name. Dinner, drinks, thank you hearts. I looked at the places we'd gone. Every one of them had some tie to experiential dining or a luxury city eats. I realized she never once asked me what food I liked. Never once let me pick a spot. Never once split a check. It wasn't that she was mean or fake. She was really good at what she was doing. She wasn't scamming me exactly. I mean, I agreed to every dinner. I paid. I showed up. But she created her entire dating life like a business model. Find men. Pick high-end spots. Let them pay. Keep them interested just enough. Repeat. I sat there on my couch, scrolling through messages she'd sent me, reading them again with fresh eyes. Every compliment, every flirty joke, it all started to feel like lines from a script. I wasn't a connection. I was a walking dinner reservation. I didn't even confront her. What was the point? She'd probably just shrug and call it value exchange or some buzzword I wouldn't understand. Instead, I stopped replying. She messaged once, asking if I was free for all my coys next weekend. I ignored it. She never followed up. A month later, I saw her again. Not in person, but in a TikTok someone posted from a restaurant downtown. She was in the background, laughing at something, sipping a drink, sitting across from a new guy in a blazer who looked like he played squash and had 3 podcast subscriptions. I hope she got dessert. Finance girl with a dating calendar and a taste for upscale appetizers. You know those people who come across super normal online, like they'd mastered the algorithm of being just interesting enough without trying too hard? That was Mark. His profile had this perfect mix. One picture with a dog, one in a bookstore, and one blurry one from what looked like a camping trip. His bio said lover of thunderstorms and big questions, which sounds fake now that I think about it, but back then I thought it was kind of charming. We matched on Monday. I remember because it was raining and I was eating leftover noodles on the couch, half watching a baking show. He messaged first and said something like rainy days made the best dates, and asked me what my go-to comfort food was. It was cheesy but sweet. We talked all night. It was easy, casual, kind of flirty. By Friday, we had plans to meet. We went to this weird little indie coffee shop downtown that smells like wet brick and burnt toast. I liked it though. It had those big mismatched couches and old posters taped to the walls. He walked in wearing this beat-up jacket and boots that looked like they'd been through a storm. He had this quiet, chill energy like he was never in a rush. We sat down and started talking, and it felt like I was catching up with someone I'd known for a while. He asked good questions, not just small talk stuff, but deeper ones, like what do you think makes people actually compatible? Or do you think people ever date for the right reasons? I figured he was just into psychology or something. I didn't mind it. I actually kind of liked it. I told him about some of my past relationships, and he listened closely, nodding, asking follow-ups like he was really trying to understand. We ended up staying there for almost 3 hours. After that, we walked around and talked more. He mentioned he was working on a side project, something about relationships and communication. I asked if he was in grad school, and he laughed and said, not exactly, more like independent research. I didn't press. Everyone's got a thing. Our second and third dates were just as good. We saw a documentary at this small theater where the screen was basically a bedsheet, then went to a taco stand and ate in the car while it poured rain. He made me laugh without trying. He'd randomly stop mid-sentence and say something like, wait, that sounded emotionally avoidant, didn't it? And then start laughing. I thought he was just being self-aware. But then little things started to feel off. One night we were walking around and passed a group of girls sitting on some steps outside a bar. He looked at them for maybe 1 second too long, then turned to me and said, it's interesting. You can tell who leads in their relationships just by how they sit. I asked what he meant, and he launched into this weird explanation about posture and eye contact and something he called vocal lead theory. I thought he was joking, so I laughed. He didn't. He had these little theories he'd drop all the time. Stuff like people who bite their straws have commitment issues, or if someone checks their phone during a date but angles it away from you, they probably value secrecy over intimacy. At first, I thought it was just his thing. Everyone's got quirks, but it got weirder. I found out he had a YouTube channel by accident. I was scrolling through TikTok, and someone shared a clip from this video called Analyzing Real-World Dates with Psychoreal Framework Vol 12. I clicked because the title was ridiculous, and then I saw his face, clear as day, talking into the camera like some budget professor. He had a whiteboard behind him and everything. I watched in total confusion. He was breaking down a date. My date. The first one, at a coffee shop. Word for word, moment by moment. He used pseudonyms, but it was obvious. He said stuff like, Subject A exhibits classic deflection behaviors when discussing past intimacy. Note the shift in tone and the use of humor to mask vulnerability. Subject A, that was me. He was analyzing me like a case study. I went down the rabbit hole. The channel had over 100 videos, all episodes where he broke down his real-life dates using this fake psychology model he called the psychoreal matrix. He had diagrams, acronyms, even personality types he made up, like AC4, Affectionate countertype with latent resentment. What the hell does that even mean? And he wasn't just doing this with me. He had videos labeled The Theater Date, Rain Girl, Coffee and Conflict, and more. Some of them had voices dubbed over. Some were full reenactments with him acting out both sides of the conversation. He had fan comments. People actually followed this stuff like it was real science. I didn't know whether to be mad or embarrassed. I just sat there watching myself get dissected by a guy I thought liked me. And the worst part, he was charming in the videos. Like, people in the comments were siding with him, talking about how subject that clearly wasn't emotionally available. Some of them were making fun of how I moved my hands when I talked, like I was a TV character. I texted him. Said, "Hey, just saw your YouTube channel. What the hell?" He replied with, "I was gonna tell you. It's part of a bigger project on modern dating behavior. You actually came off super thoughtful." As if that made it okay. I asked if he was recording me. He said no, not audio, just mental notes. Like that made it better. I asked him if any of it was real or if I was just a walking data point. He said, "You inspire a lot of insight. That's rare." I didn't respond after that. I blocked him and reported the video. It didn't get taken down though. Apparently because he changed the names and didn't use direct footage, it was content. That word made my skin crawl. I haven't gone on many dates since. Not because I'm scared or anything like that. I just don't feel like being someone's project. I still wonder how many people out there have unknowingly been turned into episodes. How many girls sat across from him, thinking it was a date, while he was already mentally uploading their personality into his little system. I don't even know how I ended up agreeing to go on that many group dates. That's not my scene. I'm not a bring 5 people and we'll all vibe at a brewery type of guy. I like one-on-one stuff. Quiet bars, late night walks, weird movie nights. But Ashley made it sound normal, like it was part of her routine. And for some reason, I just kept saying yes. We matched on Hinge during one of those weekends where everything feels kind of stale and your fridge has nothing in it but oat milk and mustard. Her profile was full of group photos. Every single one had at least 3 people in it, usually at a picnic or brunch or some rooftop situation. Her bio just said, "Let's all hang out," with a smiley face. I probably should know. Anyway, she messaged first. Said she liked my shoes in one of my pics. Then asked if I wanted to meet up that Thursday at this outdoor trivia night with a bunch of friends. I thought she meant she'd be there and a couple of her people might show up too. I figured, sure, why not? Trivia could be fun. I showed up and immediately regretted it. There were like 12 people at the table, and no one introduced anyone. I had to just awkwardly slide into an open seat while everyone else passed nachos around and made inside jokes. Ashley sat across from me, way too far to actually talk to without yelling, and only made eye contact with me once during the entire game. And when she did, it was just to ask if I knew the capital of Slovenia. Still, I stuck around. After trivia, we all went to get ice cream, and she finally came over to stand next to me in line. She asked how my week had been, and I told her a story about my boss sending an email to the wrong person. She laughed, touched my arm, and said we should do a beach day soon. I thought maybe she was just nervous that first hour and needed to warm up. So, when she invited me to a beach bonfire thing that weekend, I said yes. That night felt even more random. Same thing. Big group, lots of side conversations, and she was bouncing around talking to everyone except me. She'd show up next to me for a second, asked if I needed more marshmallows, then disappear again. I thought maybe this was just how she operated, like maybe she was super social and didn't love intense one-on-one vibes. But I'd noticed she kept checking on this one guy named Trevor. He was tall, super tan, had this floppy stirfer haircut, and was holding a guitar the whole night like it was part of his torso. Ashley kept laughing a little too hard at his jokes, touching his shoulder every chance she got. When she sat next to him, she leaned in close. I'm not dumb. I noticed. But again, I told myself to relax. Maybe they were just friends. Maybe this was just her friend circle and I needed to chill. The third date was a movie night in someone's backyard. Projector on a sheet, beanbags, the works. She texted me saying, "Bring snacks and let's snuggle under the stars." I thought, okay, finally, something more direct. I brought popcorn, candy, and even a blanket. But when I got there, the same group of people were already there, including Trevor, who was somehow already under the one blanket Ashley had brought. I ended up sitting next to a girl named Morgan, who was super nice and very clearly on a different page than everyone else. We talked during the previews, and at one point she leaned in and said, "Wait, are you for a date tonight, or is Trevor?" That's when it really clicked. It wasn't just bad group dynamics or bad timing. Ashley was using me, or maybe not just me, maybe others too. I wasn't a date, I was part of her audience, a prop. I went home that night and scrolled back through our texts. She never once said just us or made an actual plan that didn't involve a group. Every invite was some version of come hang or you should join us. I thought it was just casual. I thought she was trying to make things low pressure, but no, I was part of a performance. The final straw came a week later when she invited me to a board game night. She said, "You'll love this one. Lots of competition." I stupidly went. This time I walked in and saw her sitting on Trevor's lap. Not even trying to hide it. Just full on lap. I stood in the doorway like an idiot holding a 6-pack of root beer. She saw me smile like nothing was weird and said, "Hey, come join." I didn't say anything. I just turned around and left. Got back in my car, sat there for a second, and then opened Instagram. I searched her name. Her story from the board game night was already up. It was a boomerang of Trevor feeding her chips. The caption said, "Winning team energy." I sent her one text, not really into being a pawn. She replied like 15 minutes later with, "What? Lol, I thought we were just hanging out. Sorry if there was a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? That's how she framed it. I didn't reply. I just blocked her and moved on. But for weeks after, I kept thinking about how people can be so casual with other people's attention. Like, yeah, no one owes anyone anything in the early stages of dating. But if you're dragging someone along to make someone else jealous, that's not just casual, that's manipulative. I ran into Morgan once again months later at a random happy hour. She remembered me and asked if I ever end up dating Ashley. I laughed and said, "Nope, but I helped her date someone else." Morgan nodded and said, "Yeah, that tracks." I never thought I'd be the kind of person who ends up in someone else's novel, like straight up pages and chapters built out of my actual life. But yeah, that happened. It's one of those things where you look back and realize all the red flags were flapping in your face, and you just stepped around them like they were cones on a sidewalk. So I met Tyler at this weird little open mic night that I didn't even want to go to. My coworker had a set. He plays folk covers of pop songs on a ukulele, and I showed up out of obligation. Tyler went up right after him. He read this short story about two people in an airport who don't speak the same language but end up falling in love through gestures and drawings. It was good, annoyingly good. Kind of dreamy and quiet and full of lines that made you think for a second longer than you wanted to. After the set, I saw him standing by the bar holding a notebook, not even pretending to play it cool. He was flipping pages like he couldn't wait to read his own thoughts again. I made a joke about how he looked like the human version of an indie movie soundtrack. He smiled and said, "Only if the movie ends in emotional disaster." That made me laugh. We started talking. He said he was working on a novel. Said it carefully like he didn't want to sound like every other guy in a denim jacket with a keyboard and no editor. He talked about characters and dialogue and how people say things they don't mean but hope they're understood anyway. I didn't know if I was into him yet, but I liked talking to him. We exchanged numbers and ended up texting that night. Our first few dates were pretty simple. Long walks, corner cafes, bookstore browsing without buying anything. He always carried that same notebook, sometimes wrote things down mid-conversation. At first, I thought it was just a habit. Creative people do weird stuff all the time. I even thought it was kind of sweet, like maybe something I said sparked a thought or helped him build a scene. He listened a lot, asked questions that dug deeper than usual. Stuff like, "What memory do you think about more than you admit?" Or, "What's something you haven't told anyone because you're scared it'll lose its meaning if you say it out loud?" Questions that feel like therapy if you're not paying attention. I told him things, real things, about growing up in a house where silence was louder than yelling, about the first time I lost someone and how I still keep their number in my phone, about the way I feel like I can never fully relax when I'm around too many people. He never made it weird. Just listened and nodded, sometimes wrote something in that little notebook of his. A few weeks in, I started to feel like maybe this was something. He'd send me pieces of writing sometimes, little poems or unfinished paragraphs, and ask what I thought. I never really knew how to critique writing, but I'd tell him what lines stuck with me, what felt honest. One time he sent me something that was so beautiful it actually made me tear a little. It was about this girl who felt like her sadness had weight, like it was sewn into her bones. I asked if it was fiction, and he said, kinda. We got close. I wouldn't say we were serious, but we were definitely more than just dating. I met some of his friends, and they all knew about me. We spent the night at each other's places. He cooked these really random meals like ramen with blueberries or pancakes at 2 a.m. I felt comfortable with him. Safe. Then one night I was scrolling on Twitter and saw a thread going viral. Some indie lit magazine had posted a story called The Girl with Quiet Bones. People were losing their minds over it, saying it was haunting, vulnerable, raw. I clicked the link. It took me less than 3 paragraphs to recognize myself. There it was, my story. My actual words lifted and molded into fiction. The memory I'd shared about my childhood kitchen. A detail I told him once about my grandma's broken teacup. Even a line I remember saying on our second date about how I sometimes feel like I take up too much space in the wrong moments. He turned me into a character. The story wasn't even that far removed. He changed my name, made me a visual artist instead of what I actually do with everything else. Uncomfortably close. The tone, the history, the things I told him when I thought I was safe inside a moment that wasn't being transcribed. I didn't text him right away. I just sat there rereading it. The ending had this line about how some people don't just survive grief. They decorate it and wear it like armor. That was something I told him, word for word, one night when we were lying on the floor listening to some dumb playlist he made. I felt exposed, like someone had taken a flashlight to the parts of me I usually keep hidden in a drawer. When I finally did text him, I said, "You published it." He replied, "I didn't use your name. I fictionalized everything. That's how writers work." That sentence made me want to throw my phone. I called him. He picked up. I asked him if he really thought it was okay to take my stories, my pain, and turn it into content for strangers to read and comment on. He said I had inspired him. Said I helped him get unstuck. Said he'd never been able to write something so honest before. Alma. He sent a few more texts over the next couple days, saying he didn't mean to hurt me. That made him feel things he hadn't felt in years. That I mattered, but none of it landed. It all just sounded like more dialogue for his next scene. I didn't tell anyone for a while, not because I was embarrassed, just because I didn't know how to explain it. How do you say, I accidentally gave someone the best story they've ever written, and now it belongs to everyone but me? Eventually, I found another version of the story in a different lit journal. Turns out he'd been publishing pieces like that for a while, bits and fragments of other people, other girls maybe, other moments that probably felt personal until he repackaged them with metaphors and poetic breaks. I stopped following him, stopped reading. I don't know if he's still writing. I'm sure he is. That was Tyler, the guy who looked me in the eye while writing my pain into paragraphs. I think the weirdest part about Nicole wasn't even what she did. It was how normal it all felt, right up until it didn't. Like you ever meet someone and everything clicks a little too easily. That was her. We matched during a slow week in January. I had the flu and nothing better to do but swipe while bundled up in 3 hoodies watching old sitcoms. Her profile said she loved iced lattes, lawn walks through cemeteries, which I took as quirky, not creepy, and men who could actually hold a conversation. She looked sharp. Her photos were all clean and balanced. Not influencer level, but curated just enough to seem effortless. The kind of person who knew her angles and used good lighting. We matched and she messaged first, "Let's skip the small talk. What's your biggest fear?" Which threw me, but I replied with something dumb about squirrels gaining intelligence. She sent a laughing emoji and said, "Good, you're in." That's how it started. Our first date was simple, coffee in this tiny corner cafe with mismatched chairs and weird indie music playing from a dusty speaker. She wore all black, had chipped green nail polish, and was drinking cold brew in the dead of winter. She talked with this calm confidence, like someone who never second-guessed herself. I was kind of intimidated, but also weirdly into it. She asked good questions, made sharp observations, and didn't look at her phone once. We talked about bad dates, music we pretended to hate but actually loved, and whether or not ghosts were real. She made me laugh in that quick, fast way that kind of catches you off guard. I remember thinking I hadn't enjoyed talking to someone that much in a while. The next few dates were even better. She took me to a record store and asked me to pick one album that summed up my last relationship. I picked Blonde by Frank Ocean, and she nodded like that explained everything. Another time, we went to this old bookstore with a cat that sat on the counter and stared at everyone like it knew too much. She called it creepy but wise. Everything felt kind of dreamy, like we were in a cool little bubble vibing off each other. She wasn't too serious, but she wasn't flaky either. She texted at random hours with links to weird articles or photos of street art which she found interesting. And I liked how she didn't do the performative affection thing. It wasn't constant compliments or fake enthusiasm. She just showed up every time exactly as she was. But little stuff started to feel off. I catch her watching me in this way that felt different. Not romantic, not flirty. More like she was studying me, like I was being evaluated. I brushed it off at first, thought maybe she was just intense, or maybe I was overthinking it. Then one night she asked if I still use dating apps. I told her no, not really, not since we started seeing each other. She smiled and said, "That's good. Some people like to keep a rotation." It didn't seem like a big comment at the time, but now I look back, I realize that was the first time she hinted at what was really going on. We started seeing each other more regularly. Every time we hung out, I liked her a little more. But she never posted me. Never mentioned me to her friends, at least not that I knew of. I didn't think much of it since I'm not big on social media either. But then I started noticing that when we were together, she'd always screenshot funny things I said. Jokes, phrases, quotes. And not in a that's cute kind of way. She'd literally type stuff down in her notes app and say, "That's gold." One night, we were watching some random true crime documentary, and I saw a notification pop up on her phone. It was from a group chat called The Archive, just those two words. I didn't think much of it until I saw another pop up a few minutes later from someone named May, asking, "Did he say it yet?" She turned her phone over quickly and said, "Sorry to just friends being dumb." The next day, I got curious. I searched The Archive on social media just to see what came up. And I found it. Not the chat, obviously, but something else. An Instagram account with that name. It was private, but the bio said reviewing modern dating from the inside. I sent a follow request without really expecting anything. A few hours later, I got accepted. And what I saw made my stomach drop. The account had posts, screenshots, quotes, even short anonymous videos, all reviewing conversations from dating apps, first dates, text exchanges, and private messages. Men's names were blacked out, but it was all pretty detailed. Each post had a snarky caption underneath. Some were lighthearted, but others were just cruel. And then I found one that was me. I knew it was me. I recognized the exact sentence I'd said on our second date about how my last relationship felt like being on a seesaw with one person always jumping off too early. She had posted it with the caption, "Can someone get this man a therapist and a helmet?" I sat there staring at the screen, not even angry at first, just confused. She never asked to share anything. Never told me I was being recorded. I kept scrolling and realized this wasn't just her. It was a whole circle of women doing it. Reviewing, scoring, mocking, like some underground Yelp for dating. I didn't message her right away. I wanted to process it first. But the more I thought about it, the more sick it felt. This girl I'd been opening up to, trusting, spending time with, she was basically crowdsourcing my emotional content for anonymous internet points. When I finally did text her, I kept it short. Just said, "So I found the archive. Thanks for turning my vulnerability into performance." She replied a few minutes later with, "It's anonymous. No one knows it's you. Chill." That was it. Chill. I blocked her, took screenshots of the posts, and sent them to the app support team just in case. I don't know if anything came of it. The account went private again the next day. I told a friend, and he said, "Dude, what the hell? That's like emotional surveillance." And yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. Like someone had set up cameras in my brain without asking and started streaming clips for entertainment. I haven't used dating apps much since. Not because I think this is normal. Most people don't do stuff like that. But because it reminded me that some people aren't dating for connection. They're dating for content, for material, for clout. The worst part was how calm he was when he said it. Like he was ordering food, not even expensive food. Like drive-through level confidence. But let me back up. I met Andrew during a really weird chapter of my life. I just started a new job where nobody talked unless it was through Slack. My lease had just jumped up by $200 a month. And I was deep in that quiet, gray kind of loneliness that makes you download dating apps at 2 a.m. just so you feel like you exist to someone. His profile wasn't flashy, just a couple of photos of him reading by a window, one of him hiking with a neutral face, and a short bio that said, looking for something balanced. Prefer clear communication. Honestly, that sounded kind of mature. We started chatting, and right away it felt different. He wasn't rushing the convo, but he also didn't do that drive away doing stuff either. His messages were thoughtful. A little cold, but respectful. Like he had rules about how to speak to people. He'd ask questions like, what's your ideal weekday? Or what does emotional safety mean to you? Stuff that made me pause and think. I liked that. We met for coffee on a rainy Wednesday, one of those annoying drizzles where the sky never fully commits to raining, but your socks still get wet anyway. He showed up wearing this tailored coat, perfectly clean sneakers, and the kind of watch you only wear if you want people to know it's not from a mall kiosk. He shook my hand when we met. Not in a business way, just measured, like everything he did had a setting, and he never turned the dial too far. We sat near the window. He ordered Channel mild tea, which I immediately judged but kept to myself. I got a latte. He asked about my job, my family, my favorite movie. He listened really well, always nodding, always responding in these short, controlled sentences. He didn't laugh much, but when he did, it felt like he decided the moment was worth reacting to. And I don't mean that in a rude way. It was just efficient. We talked for 2 hours. At the end, he asked if I wanted to go out again, and I said yes. I figured he was just a quiet, serious kind of guy. The kind who reads nonfiction on purpose and wakes up early on weekends for no reason. Nothing wrong with that. Over the next couple weeks, we went on a few more dates, always planned down to the detail. He'd send me a time, location, what the place was known for, and then show up exactly on time. Never late, never early. One time I got there 10 minutes ahead of schedule and he was already seated, sipping water like he'd been downloaded into the booth. I started picking up on little things. He never touched his phone during our time together, but always checked it immediately after. He asked deep questions, but never shared much back unless I directly asked. And when I did, his answers felt templated, like a monologue he practiced. I remember asking him once what he was like in past relationships, and he said, consistent. I'm generous with structure and expectations, and I appreciate emotional clarity. That was his whole answer. I had no idea what it meant, but I nodded like it made sense. Then came the dinner. It was at a really sleek spot. One of those places with low lighting where the menu has words you pretend to know how to pronounce. He reserved a booth. Ordered for both of us after asking if I had any allergies. I remember thinking, wow, this is kind of old school. But I went with it. I was honestly curious where this was going. Midway through the meal, between bites of roasted beet salad or whatever, he said he wanted to have a direct conversation. He looked at me and said, I've enjoyed getting to know you. You're emotionally intelligent, communicative, and physically compatible with what I seek. I blinked. Physically compatible. And he said, I don't view dating through a traditional emotional lens. For me, relationships work better as structured agreements. I believe all partnerships are transactional at their core. He just dropped it there, like he was telling me how he prefers oat milk over almond. I asked what he meant, and he explained, calmly, like he was presenting a pitch deck, that he believes in arrangements, not sugar dating exactly, not money for time, but more like clearly defined roles and benefits. He said he wasn't looking to fall in love. He was looking to find someone who saw the value in emotional stability, intimacy, and mutual benefit without the chaos of romantic expectation. I didn't know what to say. My brain was buffering. He kept going. Said he was open to covering certain expenses like travel or wellness-related costs as part of the dynamic. That in return, he expected loyalty, communication, and consistent time spent together. He used words like reciprocal value and predictability. I finally asked, so you're saying you'll date me, but only if I agree to a contract, basically? He nodded, essentially, but verbal agreements are fine too. I just sat there, staring at the flickering candle in the middle of the table like it was going to answer for me. He wasn't creepy. He wasn't pushy. He wasn't even smug. He genuinely believed what he was saying, like he thought this through 100 times, like he thought he was offering me clarity in a world full of confusion. I said I'd think about it, just so I could get out of there without making a scene. The next day, he sent me a message thanking me for engaging in intentional dialogue and said he was open to discussing next steps if I was interested. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I just left it. I told a couple friends about it. One said it sounded like modern dating, just more honest. Another said it felt like a job interview where the job was being someone's emotional assistant. I agreed with both of them, which made it even more confusing. Here's the thing. I don't think Andrew was a bad guy. I really don't. I think he genuinely believed that love was chaos and structure was salvation. That if you eliminate surprise and define roles clearly, no one gets hurt. And maybe that works for some people. But it didn't work for me. The only reason I even agreed to meet Claire was because my roommate dared me to. That sounds dumb, but it's true. I've been swiping left on everyone for weeks and just saying they look annoying or this feels like a bot. So he grabbed my phone and swiped right on 5 people without telling me. Claire was one of them. Blonde, big glasses, tongue out selfie in the second photo, and a bio that said, voice memos greater than texts. I remember groaning and saying, she's got to be the kind of person who claps when the plane lands. But she messaged me first, said, what's your most controversial food opinion? Which was decent. I said I like cold pasta better than hot pasta, and she replied with, you're sick, but I respect it. We talked a bit, and her messages were kind of funny. She sent a few voice notes too, which I found weird at first, but she had a really animated way of talking. She kind of talked like she was narrating a vlog that didn't exist. Super expressive, lots of random sound effects, that kind of thing. We made plans to meet the following Thursday. She picked a place, a taco spot that was inside an old laundromat. Gimmicky, but cool. She showed up in this big hoodie with cats on it, ripped jeans, and bright green sneakers. Her energy was loud, but not in a bad way. She joked with the waiter, took a picture of the menu for vibes, and said she liked how I looked better in person. I didn't know how to respond, so I just said thanks and ordered a Sprite. We sat at this little metal table and talked about the most random stuff. Her old dog, how she once almost got banned from Disneyland, why she thinks people who like mint chocolate chip ice cream aren't narcissists. She had this way of telling stories where her hands moved a lot, and her eyes got wide like she was constantly surprised by her own thoughts. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of fun being around someone that animated. It felt like hanging out with a cartoon character who also happened to be super cute. After the date, she texted me later that night and said, you're actually really chill. I didn't think you'd be chill. I didn't ask what that meant. We texted a bit that weekend, and she sent me some funny memes and another voice note where she talked about almost crying at Trader Joe's because they were out of those frozen dumplings she likes. I remember laughing and thinking she was growing on me. We hung out a few more times, grabbed donuts, walked around this weird flea market, went to a movie where she whispered commentary the whole time. She was definitely extra, but I didn't mind it. She made things entertaining. I thought maybe she was just one of those people who are always on. But then she started pulling away. She didn't ghost me completely, but she started replying slower, stopped initiating plans, and didn't send her usual chaotic voice notes anymore. I figured it had fizzled out and didn't take it too personally. Happens all the time, right? Then like 3 weeks later, I'm lying in bed doing that thing where you scroll endlessly until your brain turns to soup, and I land on this viral video someone reposted on Twitter. It was captioned, the way he said spaghetti has me screaming, with like 30,000 likes. I press play, and there she is, Claire, sitting in a car, holding a drink, talking directly to the camera, and she's doing an impersonation of me. At first, I wasn't sure. She didn't say my name. But then she said, so I went on a date with this guy who said cold pasta is elite, and I swear he talks like if Siri tried to do a stand-up routine. And then she said the exact thing I'd said about spaghetti textures and made this voice, my voice, or at least her version of it. Slightly monotone, kind of robotic, exaggerated pauses. I sat up in bed, just staring at the screen. The video was over a minute long. She kept going. Described how I sat, how I talked with my hands, and I was slowly trying to explain math to a dog, even made fun of how I said, Sprite with no ice. The comments were brutal. People were calling me Spaghetti Man, saying I sounded like a confused podcast host, making jokes about me being a robot who escaped a library. She never used my name, but anyone who knew me, anyone who'd seen her stories when we were hanging out would know. And clearly they did, because I got 2 BNs from people I hadn't talked to in months saying, "Dude, is this you?" with a video attached. I felt weird. Not mad exactly, but like I just found out someone had read my diary out loud to a stadium. It wasn't just teasing. It was the way she said it, all with this smug little laugh. Like I was a character she'd invented for content. Like I was disposable. I didn't message her. I didn't know what I'd even say. "Hey, thanks for turning my voice into a punchline for the internet." Nah, I just sat with it. A few days later, she posted another video, this time roasting a different guy. Some dude who she said kept using the word elevated on their date. And I realized that was her whole thing. She was mining her dates for material, like we were all auditions for a part in her ongoing stream of content. If something funny or awkward happened, it became a skit. If someone said something offbeat, it got exaggerated and broadcasted. Her followers ate it up. I looked back and saw that she had other videos too. Different voices, different impressions, all about guys she dated. Some were less harsh, others worse. All of them felt like a warning sign I hadn't noticed in time. I ended up unfollowing her and making my socials private. Not because I thought she'd come after me again, but because I didn't want to be watched anymore. I didn't want to wonder if anything I said was going to end up in a video with a caption like, "Dating in 2025 is wild." It messed with me more than I thought it would. I started second-guessing how I talked on dates, wondering if I was saying something that sounded too scripted or too weird. For a while, I didn't want to meet anyone new. I didn't want to be content. I met Kevin through a friend of a friend, which always feels safer than apps. You figure if they're in the same circle, they're probably not terrible. He was at this little birthday thing, sitting in a plastic lawn chair, sipping something out of a solo cup, and laughing at a story about a raccoon in someone's garage. I remember thinking he had a friendly face. Not the most exciting first impression, but sometimes that's good. At that point in my life, I didn't want excitement. I wanted solid. We talked that night for a while, mostly about random stuff, bad roommates, sandwiches, and the weird fact that neither of us liked fireworks. It was light and easy. After the party, he messaged me on Instagram saying, "Didn't get to say goodbye." That's rude, right? I thought that was a cute way to keep the combo going. Our first date wasn't super flashy. Just a little coffee place near my apartment that smelled like cinnamon and always had someone loudly typing in the corner. He showed up early and had already ordered his drink. He stood when I walked in, which I thought was kind of old school but nice. We talked about jobs, family stuff, favorite movies. He was thoughtful and asked questions that didn't feel like a script. He wasn't all that expressive, but he'd look at me in this quiet way like he was really listening. We saw each other a few more times after that. He picked me up in his car that always smelled like one of those pine tree air fresheners. We went to the beach once, walked around aimlessly, talking about whether ghosts were real. He said he didn't believe in them, but secretly hoped they were. That stuck with me. Something about him felt gentle, like he wasn't trying to win anything. He just liked being around. After about a month, we were hanging out pretty regularly. He started texting more, checking in randomly during the day. One time he dropped off suit when I was sick and didn't even come in. Just left it with a note that said, "Don't die." That'd be annoying. I liked that he wasn't over the top, but still paid attention. But somewhere around week 5, things started getting weird. It started small. He'd ask me questions that felt oddly specific. Like, if someone asked to see your DMs, would that feel invasive or normal? I told him it would depend who was asking. Then he asked if I thought flirting counted as cheating, even if it was just to test the waters. I said yeah, obviously, and he nodded like I'd passed a quiz. He also got really interested in my phone. Not in a creepy way at first, just little comments like, "You're always getting notifications," or "Who texts you that early?" But one night, he flat out asked me to show him my recent matches from when we first started talking. I laughed thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. He said, "I'm just curious. You can tell a lot about someone from what they're attracted to." That gave me a weird feeling in my stomach. But I brushed it off, made a joke, changed the subject. Then one day, I got a weird message from an account I didn't recognize. It was some guy named Jordan with no profile picture, messaging me like we were in the middle of a conversation. He said something like, "So are you single or what?" I replied, confused, saying I didn't know who he was. He got defensive. Said I'd been flirting with him a week ago. Sent a screenshot of a message from an account that looked like mine. Same photos, same bio, but it wasn't my actual profile. It had a slightly different username. My heart dropped. I checked all my apps. My real profile hadn't been touched, but someone had created a fake one using my info. I told Kevin about it. He acted surprised, said, "That's crazy. People are so weird online." I agreed and started reporting the account. Later that week, a friend of mine, someone I hadn't talked to in months, sent me a screenshot. It was another message from a random profile pretending to be me. This time it was more flirty, more bold. The account was gone by the time I tried to check it, but the timing was too strange. I started wondering if maybe I was being messed with on purpose. So I brought it up again to Kevin. I said it felt targeted, like someone was trying to mess with my head. He kind of looked at me for a second, then said, "What if someone just wanted to see how you'd react? Like, maybe they just wanted to make sure you're loyal." I asked him what he meant. He shrugged and said, "People get played all the time. Wouldn't it make sense to test people before getting too invested?" That's when my stomach sank. I asked him directly, "Did you make those fake accounts?" He didn't even try to lie. He just said, "Yeah, I did. But it wasn't about control or anything. I just needed to know if I could trust you. I've been lied to before. I can't go through that again." I just stared at him. I couldn't believe it. This guy I trusted, who brought me soup and said ghosts were cool, had been pretending to be strangers online just to see if I'd cheat. He'd catfish me. On purpose. For weeks. I told him I needed time and walked out. He texted later saying he was sorry, that it was just a test, and he felt awful. That he didn't expect me to actually respond. He just wanted to confirm I was real. That he panicked. I didn't reply. What messes me up is that I probably would have kept seeing him. I liked him. I felt comfortable. But now every memory felt staged, like he'd been studying me, setting traps, building trust just to poke holes in it later. It took a while for that to fade. I stopped dating for a few months after that. I couldn't even talk about it for a while because every time I explained it to someone, they made the same face, half shocked, half disgusted. I didn't want sympathy. I just wanted to feel like I hadn't been part of some weird experiment. I was at this party in someone's backyard the night I met Haley. Not a wild party, just one of those casual Friday night things where people bring folding chairs and someone's dog keeps stealing tortilla chips. I wasn't really trying to meet anyone. I'd just come from work, smelled like printer toner, and probably had pen on my face. But Haley came up to me while I was standing near the cooler trying to pick the least warm drink and said, "You don't look like you want to be here." I laughed and said, "That obvious." She was wearing this oversized flannel, ripped jeans, and had her hair tied up like she hadn't tried too hard, but still looked good. There was something quick about her. Not fast talking or loud, but sharp, like she was always 5 steps ahead of the conversation. We sat on the grass and talked for like 2 hours straight. Thought nothing really. Bad school lunches, old cartoons, why grape-flavored stuff never tastes like actual grapes. At some point she asked for my phone and put her number in. Said, "Text me or don't. I'll probably text you either way." I did, the next day. We started hanging out a lot, mostly in that lazy, not quite dating way. Grabbing fries, going on Target runs for no reason, watching dumb YouTube compilations at her place. I liked being around her. She was funny in that way where half the jokes were just inside her head, and she'd only share them if you asked. I never felt bored around her. She had this wild energy that made you feel like something interesting was always about to happen, even if all you were doing was sitting in traffic. After about 2 weeks, things got more flirty. She'd text me late, send selfies with weird captions, tell me songs reminded her of me. I thought it was turning into something. I wasn't even thinking about other people at that point. I deleted the apps without really noticing. One night we went to this little fair that popped up in the parking lot behind an old furniture store. It had all the usual stuff. Carnival games, questionable rides, deep-fried everything. We went on the Ferris wheel and she held my hand the whole time. I remember looking over at her and thinking, I'm gonna fall for this girl. We kissed that night. Right after she threw up a little from the spinning ride, which sounds gross, but it was kind of hilarious and sweet at the same time. She laughed it off, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and kissed me anyway. After that, it felt real. For a couple weeks, we acted like we were together. She called me every night, sometimes just to sit on the phone and not talk. She introduced me to her friends at this housewarming party like we'd been a thing for months. I was in it. Fully. I even told my sister about her, which I don't do unless it's serious. Then came the night everything flipped. We were at her place, laying on her couch watching some movie with the volume too low. She got up to grab something from the kitchen, and her phone lit up. Normally, I don't look. I don't snoop. But the message popped up right on the screen, and it just caught my eye. It said, "Is he close to saying it yet? You're gonna win this bet, lol." My chest tightened. I didn't even know what I was looking at yet, but I knew it was bad. She came back, saw me staring at her phone, and didn't even try to hide it. Just sighed and said, "Okay, wait, before you freak out." That sentence is never followed by anything good. She sat down next to me and explained, real casual, like she was explaining why she forgot to water a plant, that a few weeks ago her friends made this bet. Nothing serious, just a dumb challenge. The goal was to make someone fall for her and get them to say, "I love you first." She said she didn't mean for it to get this far. That was just supposed to be some random vibe from the party. That it was just supposed to be a joke. I didn't say anything for a while. I felt like I'd just been dunked in cold water. She kept talking. Said she actually started to like me for real. That she was going to back out of the bet. That wasn't like the other guys. All the stuff people say when they realize they're about to lose something they weren't supposed to care about. I asked her if any of it was real. The calls. The Ferris wheel. The dumb voice memos she used to send me while walking to the store. She didn't answer. That silence said enough. I left without saying much. Just grabbed my hoodie and walked out. She texted me later saying she was sorry, that I was right to be upset, that I could hate her if I wanted. I didn't respond. I couldn't even look at my phone for a few days. What got me wasn't just the lie. It was that she'd made me feel like I mattered intentionally, not by accident. She studied me, knew what to say, how to make me feel seen, how to keep it close. And all the while she had a countdown in the background. A deadline. A goal. I kept replaying everything in my head. Every laugh, every handhold, every stupid little text that felt like a peek into something real. I wondered how many of them were things she would have said to anyone. Or worse, how many of them were just strategy. A few weeks later, I saw her at another party. She didn't come up to me. Just stayed on the other side of the yard, talking to some guy in a bucket hat. She looked the same, funny, effortless, magnetic. I wondered if he was part of another bet. Or if maybe this time she meant it. The whole thing with Ben started because I had a flat tire. No, seriously. I was on my way to a date with someone else, already late, already stressed, when I pulled into a gas station and realized my front tire was completely done. I stood there for like 5 minutes, staring at it like it might magically reinflate itself, before calling it quits and canceling the date. I went inside to grab a soda while I waited for the roadside guy, and that's where Ben walked up to me and asked if I needed help. Just like that, some stranger in a beanie, sipping a Red Bull, asking if I knew how to change a tire. He ended up helping. Not because I couldn't figure it out, but because he insisted and I didn't have the energy to argue. He was chatty, friendly in this low-effort kind of way, like someone who's used to people opening up to him fast. After we got the tire swapped, he said, "You seem cool. Want to get coffee sometime?" I figured I owed him one, or maybe I just felt like the universe owed me something after ruining my other plans, so I gave him my number. We met up 2 days later at this weird diner that looked like it hadn't changed since 1995. I walked in and he was already there, drinking black coffee and flipping through a book that looked fake intellectual. One of those titles people carry around, but never finish. He stood up when I walked in. He made this grin that felt too easy, like he used it 1,000 times before. He was charming, I'll give him that. Knew how to tell a story. Said things like, "You got good energy," and most people are afraid to say what they actually mean, but you're not like that, right? Like he'd already decided who I was and was just waiting for me to fit the shape. Our conversation bounced all over. He talked about growing up on the coast, getting into photography, dating people who didn't get it. He asked about my past relationships, my family, if I believed in fate. I gave him short answers at first, trying to keep things light, but he had this way of nudging the conversation deeper, like he wanted to crack something open. I don't know why I kept seeing him after that. Maybe because it was easy. Or maybe because he made me feel interesting, like my thoughts were worth analyzing. He'd say stuff like, "That's such a rare perspective," when I said something basic. One time I told him I hated surprise parties, and he said, "That makes sense. You've probably had to brace for a lot in life." Like, what does that even mean? It started to get weirder the more comfortable he got. He'd say things that sounded nice at first, but if you really listened, they weren't. Like, "I like that you're not exhausting to be around," or "you don't expect too much." And that's really refreshing. I'd brush it off because I didn't want to start something over one weird comment, but they kept coming. One night, we were sitting on my couch watching some dumb reality show, and out of nowhere he goes, "I think the reason I'm drawn to you is because you've been through stuff. You can tell. You move like someone who's had to deal with hard things." I turned and looked at him, waiting for more. He just kept watching the screen like he hadn't just psychoanalyzed me mid-episode. I asked, "What do you mean by that?" He shrugged and said, "You're easier to be with. Girls who've been through stuff. I don't know, he'll push it hard. They don't need everything to be perfect." He said it like it was a compliment. I felt frozen for a second, like my brain was trying to catch up. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the silence sit there while the show kept playing in the background. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did and didn't care. After he left that night, I sat on my bed and tried to make sense of what he'd said. I went over every conversation we'd had, looking for signs I missed. And suddenly they were all there. All the little things I thought were odd but forgivable. All the ways he'd praised me for being low maintenance or real. It was like he saw me as a product of damage, and that's what made me dateable. I didn't text him the next day, or the day after. He eventually messaged saying, "You good?" And I said, "I just need some space." He replied, "That's cool. I get it. Let me know when you're ready to talk again." I never was. Here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with liking someone who's been through hard things. But the way Ben talked about it, it was like he was collecting trauma girls because they were easier to manage, less demanding, more grateful for crumbs. Like he thought we wouldn't push back, wouldn't expect too much, wouldn't leave. It made me sick when I thought about it. All the times I went up to him. All the pieces I handed over, thinking it was safe, thinking it meant we were building something real. But he wasn't holding them carefully, he was inventorying them. I talked to a friend about it, and she said, "Sounds like you wanted someone who wouldn't challenge him." And yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe Ben didn't want a partner. He wanted a cushion. I stopped replying to his messages. He sent a couple more over the next few weeks, always framed as casual check-ins. Like, "Hey, just passing by your street and thought of you," or "Hope everything's been chill." I didn't respond. I didn't block him either because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he got under my skin. But I was done. Sometimes I wonder how many other girls he said that to. How many people he's dated not because he liked who they were, but because of what he assumed they wouldn't ask for. It's weird how you can spend weeks thinking someone gets you, only to realize they were just paying attention in a different way. Not the sweet kind of attention, but the what can I use later kind. That's what happened with Amanda. We met at this random pop-up art event in an old parking garage. I'd gone with some friends from work, mostly for the free drinks, and was standing near this installation of stacked TVs playing glitchy loops of people brushing their teeth when she walked up and asked if I thought the piece was about identity or decay. I said I thought it was just weird for the sake of weird. She smiled like she liked that answer. We talked for a while, moved from the exhibit to the little makeshift bar. She was funny, dry humor, quick comebacks. Said she worked in the creative space, which didn't mean much. But she mentioned copywriting and branding, so I figured advertising or something similar. She asked me what I did, and I told her I worked in design. She lived a little, asked a million questions about how I got into it, what kind of stuff I liked to make, what my process was like. At the time, I thought it was cool that she was so into it, like she genuinely wanted to understand how my brain worked. We exchanged numbers, and she texted me that night, still thinking about that glitchy toothbrushing art, Let's go somewhere not haunted by neon screens next time. I laughed, texted back, and we made plans. Our first real date was at a rooftop bar downtown that she claimed had midnight movie theater vibes. It didn't, but the drinks were good and the lights were low, so I went with it. She told me about her freelance gigs, the startup she almost joined, her time in LA working with a wild but brilliant founder. She talked a lot, but in a way that felt practiced, like she knew how to keep people listening. Still, I didn't mind. We vibed. We laughed. She touched my hand when she made a point, and when we kissed goodnight, she smiled like she already knew I'd want to see her again. We started hanging out a lot. Coffee shops, bookstores, weird pop-ups, long walks where she asked deep questions like, if you could delete one of your memories, would you? She said stuff like that often, little mind-bendy thoughts that sounded deep in the moment. She'd send me voice notes randomly throughout the day, usually commenting on something she'd overheard or a phrase she liked. It all felt very artsy, very in the moment, very us. What I didn't realize until later was that a lot of those moments weren't just ours. The first time I felt something was off, we were sitting in this tiny cafe, and I was telling her about this idea I had for a story. Not for anything serious, just this dumb little concept I had been thinking about for months. Something about a guy who designs objects that don't exist yet, kind of like futuristic wish fulfillment items. I'd only ever told one other person. Amanda listened closely, nodding, asking all the right questions. A week later, she sent me a link to a blog post she published. She wrote for a site about creative trends and niche storytelling, which I only found out then. The post was titled Designing the Impossible, Imagining Objects Before They're Real. I read the whole thing. My stomach sank. She didn't copy my story word for word, but it was the same idea, the same emotional spin. Even one of the lines I'd said, about how people are always one invention behind their own needs, was there almost verbatim. I asked her about it, trying not to sound mad. I said, that article you wrote kind of reminded me of something I told you. She didn't even blink, just smiled and said, oh yeah, I thought that idea was so cool. It inspired me. Hope that's okay. Hope that's okay. I tried to let it go, but it kept happening. I tell her about a weird dream I had, and 2 weeks later, she tweets some poetic interpretation of it with 1,000 likes. I shared this visual concept I was sketching for a project at work, and she casually mentioned it during a networking Zoom she invited me to sit in on, like it was her own train of thought. I know what people might say. That's how creativity works, or inspiration is everywhere. And sure, that's true, but this didn't feel like inspiration. It felt like harvesting. The moment it really clicked, I was at her place helping her move stuff around before a photo shoot she was planning. She has sticky notes all over the wall with little phrases and fragments. One of them said, trauma as texture, which was something I'd said while half joking during a deep talk at 2 a.m. Another said, designing absence, which I remembered explaining to her during a long walk. A few others were directly pulled from things I'd told her. Oh, my childhood, my weird rituals, even the metaphor I used once about my brain being like a crowded train station. She'd written them all down like research notes. I stared at the wall while she moved around the room, and for the first time I felt gross, like I'd been studied instead of understood. I confronted her gently, just asked, do you write all this stuff down when people say it to you? She smiled again, that same smile, and said, only the good stuff. That was her answer. Only the good stuff. I didn't know how to explain how that made me feel. I wasn't mad exactly, not in a yelling kind of way, but I felt stolen from. Like I'd been emotionally open, and instead of holding it, she cataloged it. After that, I pulled back. Stopped telling her things. Here's shorter answers. She noticed, obviously. Asked if something was wrong, said I felt muted lately. I wanted to tell her that she'd taken all my best parts and turned them into captions and blog posts, but I didn't. I just said I was tired. Eventually, we fizzled out. She stopped texting as much, and I stopped replying when she did. No big blow-up, no breakup talk, just silence growing between us. I saw her post a quote on Instagram a few weeks later. It said, some people are just story minds. You dig deep enough, and they'll hand you gold. The caption read, grateful for the ones who inspire even when they don't mean to. And that was that. There was nothing suspicious about Justin at first. He was the kind of guy who blended in a little too well. Clean haircut, one of those permanent 5 o'clock shadows. Always wore button-downs like he'd just come from some casual but important meeting. I met him at my cousin's engagement party of all places. He was friends with the groom and spent most of the night leaning against the kitchen counter talking about old Nintendo games with a beer in hand. Someone introduced us halfway through the night, and we hit it off in that very chill, very background noise kind of way. He wasn't loud or showy, which I liked. He just had that steady, mellow vibe. He asked for my number before I left. I remember thinking it had been a while since someone asked without saying something stupid first. He didn't try to be smooth, just handed me his phone and said, "If you're down to hang out sometime, I'm not awful company." That kind of self-aware charm works on me, I won't lie. Our first date was the next weekend. We met up for brunch at a place that was aggressively average. No long wait, no trending menu items, just eggs and coffee and slightly sticky tables. He was easy to talk to, funny in a quiet way. He told me about his job in marketing, how he just moved into a new apartment, how he'd been on a terrible date recently where the girl made him watch an entire reality show season in one sitting. He wasn't bitter about it, though. He laughed about it. Said he was just glad she didn't make him join a group chat afterward. It felt easy with him. Familiar, even. We went on more dates. Walks through neighborhoods with old houses, wine and pizza on his balcony, lazy Sundays where we didn't even leave the bed until afternoon. He always had snacks I liked. Always remembered the little things I told him. Like how I hated when people said LOL out loud or how I preferred my toast burnt. He'd do things like hold my hand while driving or send me random playlists with names like For When Your Brain Is Too Loud. At one point I actually thought, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe I found someone who just gets it. And then everything unraveled. It started with a DM from a girl I didn't know. She messaged me on Instagram and said, "Hey, I know this is random, but I think we should talk." I almost deleted it. I assumed it was spam or someone trying to sell me fake skincare. But then she sent a screenshot. It was a message from Justin. Same pet name he used with me, same photo of him holding his dog that he'd sent me. Word for word, the same compliment he'd given me after our second date. "You make Sundays feel like Saturdays." My stomach dropped. I messaged her back. Her name was Tessa. She was nice about it, nervous but nice. She explained they'd been seeing each other for almost 2 months. She found my profile because she saw a photo tagged on one of his mutuals that I happened to be in. She clicked around, saw a post with Justin's name in the caption, and got curious. That's when she started connecting the dots. I told her everything I knew, and then another girl messaged me, and another. 4 in total, all of us thinking we were the one he was focusing on. All of us with similar stories, similar dates, same playlists, same pet names, even the same exact texts. I couldn't believe it at first. I didn't want to. I thought maybe they were exes, or he was just friends with them, or maybe they were lying. But then we started trading receipts. He told me his favorite band was Pinnagrove. Same for the others. He told me his mom was a librarian who smelled like peppermint and old books. Same exact line, copy-pasted. He made me a sandwich after our third date with peach preserves and turkey. Said it was his special combo. Guess what? Tessa had it too. And Emily. And Zoe. Even the dumb joke about how if he ever got hit by a bus, he wanted someone to change his last text so it didn't say something embarrassing. All of us had heard that. He wasn't just dating multiple people, he was running the same script like it was a show with reruns. When I confronted him, I didn't yell. I just asked, "How many of us are there?" He didn't even deny it, just rubbed his face and said, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I asked him what that meant. Was it supposed to be casual? Was he just seeing what stuck? He said he liked the feeling of new things. That beginnings were the best part. That once things started getting too real, he got overwhelmed and jumped back into another beginning. Said it helped him feel in control. That made me feel sick. I asked him if he'd ever actually felt anything for me, or if I was just another start. He said, "I don't know." That was the last thing I ever let him say to me. I blocked him after that. I also messaged the other girls and told them what he said. We all stopped talking to him. I heard later from someone who knew him that he moved cities a couple months after everything came out. Started fresh. Probably ran the same game all over again. Here's the thing. I'm not even mad he dated other people. It's not the exclusivity that killed me. It's the fact that everything felt recycled. Manufactured. Like he had this formula for affection and just ran it over and over until it stuck to someone. Like he didn't love people, he loved patterns. I was never someone he got to know. I was just someone he tested the script on next. I'm not really into astrology. Like, I don't hate it or anything. But I never understood how the time of year I was born was supposed to tell someone if I ghost them or cry during a movie. I don't even know my moon sign. I just know I'm a Sagittarius, and that apparently means I'm chaotic, which is kind of true, but not for cosmic reasons. I just have bad time management and forget where I put things. So when I met Alyssa and she asked for my birth time before we even got drinks, I should have known I was walking into something weird. But I didn't. I just texted my mom and got the answer because honestly, Alyssa was hot and confident in this chill, unbothered way. She had this huge, messy bun like she didn't care how it looked, but somehow it still looked amazing. Her profile had pictures of her hiking, painting, and one of her dressed like a Victorian ghost for Halloween. I was into it. We matched on a Thursday and met the next day. She picked a little vegan taco spot I'd never been to. The menu was confusing and the chairs were too low, but she made fun of everything and told me to order whatever feels like your rising sign would eat. I didn't know what that meant, so I got the least spicy taco and hoped for the best. She brought her own tarot deck in her purse, just casually had it next to her wallet and keys. She didn't pull it out or anything, she wasn't dramatic about it, but she mentioned she liked doing little readings for friends. I said something dumb like, do they ever predict food poisoning? And she rolled her eyes and said, you're definitely a fire sign. That night, we sat in my car for an hour after dinner, just talking. Weird dreams, the best kinds of soup, what music feels like when you're sad. I liked her. A lot. She was smart and funny and had this way of making you feel like everything you said was important. She'd ask questions nobody else did, like, what's the most harmless lie you tell yourself regularly? And do you think people grow out of their signs or into them? I didn't have answers for half of them, but I liked trying. We started dating kind of quickly, seeing each other almost every other day, texting constantly, staying up late sending each other voice notes. She'd randomly say things like, your Venus is showing today, and wink like that explained everything. I didn't fully get it, but I liked her energy. She made me playlists and drew me little doodles of what she imagined my aura looked like. One time she showed up at my place with a tote bag full of crystals and a bottle of lavender spray and said, your apartment needs to chill out. It was weird, yeah, but sweet. Then, like 3 weeks in, I noticed she kept mentioning something about the experiment. At first I thought it was a joke. She'd say stuff like, this is gonna be such a good test, or you're really messing up my theory. I asked what she meant, and she said, I'm just doing a thing where I date people that I'm supposedly not compatible with, astrologically speaking. I laughed. I thought she was kidding. I said, wait, seriously? And she nodded. Said it was just a thing she started doing a few months ago. She wanted to see if astrology was actually real or just vibes people project onto situations. It took me a minute to realize she wasn't joking. She had a whole spreadsheet. Not even kidding. She showed me on her laptop one day while we were sitting on her floor eating cereal. There were tabs for each person, notes on their sign, their chart breakdown, how many dates they went on, and a section titled Unexpected Emotional Reactions. I saw my name, right there, with bullet points. I asked, so I'm, what, part of your astrology experiment? She didn't even act guilty. She said, yeah, but don't take it the wrong way. I really like you. You're actually throwing off the data, which is cool. Throwing off the data, like it was a bad science result. I sat there holding a spoon and trying not to freak out. She could tell I was off, so she leaned in and said, I told you I wasn't into just dating people who fit my chart anymore. I'm trying to see if connections can override predictions. I didn't say much. I just nodded and went back to eating cereal even though my stomach didn't want it anymore. After that, everything felt different. Like every time I said something kind or thoughtful, I wondered if she was gonna log it in a column. I kept picturing her rereading our texts like they were case files. I couldn't tell if she liked me or liked that I wasn't supposed to work according to her system. I started pulling away, not on purpose. I just felt weird all the time, like I was on a reality show and didn't know what the prize was. She'd still text, still send voice notes, still show up with weird tea blends, but I couldn't stop wondering how she was tracking me. One night, she sent me a meme about pisses men crying during Pixar movies. I said, I'm not even a pisses, and she said, yeah, I know, but emotionally, you kinda are. That made me feel weirdly insulted. Not because of the pisses thing, but because I didn't even feel like myself around her anymore. I was just someone she dropped into a category and kept updating notes on. I ended it a few days later, told her I needed to focus on other stuff. She didn't cry, just said, I get it. Mutable signs aren't built for endurance. I didn't know what that meant either, but I figured she'd add it to the spreadsheet. The wildest part, months later, I saw a TikTok she made. It was about her zodiac compatibility project. She didn't say my name, but I recognized the story. She mentioned the guy who kept showing up emotionally, even though our signs said we were doomed. She said we taught her that maybe the stars were wrong. And then she ended the video with, but maybe that was the lesson all along. The comments were full of people saying, you need to find a Virgo, and this is so real alone. I didn't comment. I just scrolled past and deleted her number. I matched with Nick during this weird stretch of time where I was just kind of floating. I had just moved into a new place, didn't know half the neighborhood yet, and was spending too much money at this overpriced boba spot down the street just because I liked the vibe there. One night I was lying on my bed with a headache from looking at my screen too long, scrolling mindlessly on an app I deleted and reinstalled like 6 times that month when Nick popped up. His profile was almost aggressively normal. One picture at the beach, one holding a dog that may or may not have been his, one where he was dressed up at a wedding and captioned it when you actually own the tie. I don't even know why I swiped right. Maybe I was bored, maybe I was curious, or maybe I just needed someone to make fun of bad reality TV with. Anyway, we matched, and he messaged me first. He said, so what's your worst first date story? I need to feel better about mine. It was kind of a good line, not too try hard. I told him about this guy who made me pay for both our meals because he forgot his wallet, and then asked if I wanted to go split a milkshake after. Nick sent back a laughing emoji and said I deserved financial compensation. We started talking more, and after a couple days of exchanging memes and arguing about whether candy corn is a scam, he said no, which was clearly wrong. We made plans to meet. We met up at this little corner bar that tries really hard to live like it doesn't try at all. Brick walls, Edison bulbs, pretentious menus with drinks called things like the sad bartender and citrus rejection. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at the bar with a ginger beer and scrolling on his phone. He looked better in person, taller, more relaxed. He smiled when he saw me and said, you look like you know things. I still don't know what that meant. The date was good actually, we clicked right away. He had this sarcastic sense of humor that worked really well with mine. We made fun of the drink names, told stories about our worst job interviews, and shared fries. He listened when I talked, like really listened, and asked follow-up questions that weren't just filler. I left thinking, okay, finally someone with a working brain who doesn't make me want to walk into traffic. We kept seeing each other after that. It wasn't like an intense, everyday texting thing, but it was consistent. He'd send random thoughts, like just saw someone eat string cheese like a banana. Humanity's done, or links to random essays he was reading about weird topics like why nostalgia feels violent sometimes. He was a writer, or at least trying to be. Said he used to work in content marketing, but had been freelancing and pitching articles to smaller publications for a while. The thing that made Nick stand out, at least at first, was how curious he seemed. He'd ask these long, layered questions that didn't feel like small talk. Stuff like, do you think love is always transactional at its core? Or what's the difference between being emotionally honest and just being messy? Sometimes I'd get annoyed and tell him to just ask me what my favorite cereal was like a normal person, but deep down I liked that he was always thinking. We started opening up more. He asked about my past, my family, stuff I didn't usually share that quickly. I told him about the weird fallout I'd had with a close friend, about my parents' divorce, about the time I moved cities just to get away from everything. And he didn't flinch. He always had a way of tying it all back to some concept or theme. Like I'd say something vulnerable, and he'd pause for a second and go, that's actually really interesting, because it ties into this idea I've been writing about. That should have been my first red flag. But I didn't see it at the time. I thought he was just connecting with me, that he was processing things out loud. It wasn't until about 6 weeks in, when I was scrolling late one night before bed, that I found out what was actually going on. I saw this article posted on a site I followed. It was trending on their homepage. The title was, Why Modern Dating Feels Like a Scam. Confessions from the Age of Perpetual Swiping. I clicked on it without thinking, And by the second paragraph, my chest got tight. He didn't use my name, but the details were there. Too specific, too familiar. He described a woman he'd been seeing, how she was emotionally candid in a way that made trauma feel poetic, how she had a soft voice that always seemed like it was about to crack into laughter or tears, how she once told him that starting over felt like a form of self-defense. That was me, word for word. I'd said that on our third date. He went on to talk about how modern dating was transactional in a different way, how we trade stories and vulnerability the same way people used to trade mixtapes. He said that people offer up their damage like it's currency, and that most of the time you're not dating a person, you're collecting content. He ended the piece with a paragraph about how sometimes a connection doesn't even matter, just the way it helps shape a narrative. I read the whole thing, twice, then sat in silence, phone in my lap, just trying to breathe. It wasn't even that he used our story, it was how cold it felt. Like he'd been gathering everything I told him and filing it away, not for closeness, but for quotes. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't trust myself not to yell. I waited until the next day and texted him, "Cool article." He replied with, "I was gonna tell you." I called him. He picked up and immediately said, "You're mad, right?" I didn't answer that. I just asked, "Why?" And he gave the most Nick answer ever, because it was true, and because it's what people are feeling. I just happened to have the words for it. I told him he used me, that he turned my personal life into a metaphor, that I didn't give him permission. He said, "You were anonymous. I protected your identity." That made me laugh. I told him he could have changed the story. He could have written it without dragging my insides out for clicks. He said, "But then it wouldn't have been honest." That was the end of it. I hung up, blocked his number, didn't read anything else he wrote. Sometimes I wonder if he's still writing about me, anyone, about the next girl who opens up to him thinking she's safe.